So I hope everybody's had a good day and is ready for a fascinating 2 hours in the GFOI, the Global Forest Observations Initiative, CLP, second virtual forum Connect and Reflect. I would like to say good morning to some of you, good afternoon to others, and good evening. My name is Ellie Reed, and I'm the GFOI Country-Led Planning, the CLP coordinator. And today, with me on this call are many, but first I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from the COP Program of Support. And we all would like to welcome you to today's forum. We also have a large group of participants from almost all of the COP, now 10 countries. We're also joined by the GFOI partners. Thank you all for joining us today. During today's forum, we will focus on something that we've heard back from you and its interest to most of the countries who have started the COP process, and more specifically, the enabling factors for COP implementation. And during the next 2 hours, we'll explore together the minimum conditions and key elements to launch and to sustain the process at national level. I will give you a few announcements before I go in more details regarding our agenda and how this forum will evolve. First of all, I want to let you know that the call will be recorded. We have simultaneous translation in Spanish and English, and you can find a little globe icon inside your Zoom window, which gives you the chance to hear in the language of your choice, Spanish or English. We also want to encourage you to leave any questions anytime during the presentations or even when a discussion is going on in the Zoom chat. We will be monitoring this and we will try to bring it up for a discussion. We will start the recordings and it will be recorded, as I said, in both languages. We'll share the recording with you sometime next week. So I will be supported by my colleagues and they will be here through the entire 2 hours. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. So today, just very briefly, we will have introduction. Part of it you already heard from me, and I'll walk you through the COP process briefly to give some of the countries that are very familiar an update of what the COP is all about, and some of the other countries that are been newly added or haven't had a chance to be exposed to the COP process to learn more about it. So we will have that. We also have prepared something very interesting for you. We'll have a poll with just 3 questions where we would like to hear from you, how familiar you are with the COP, and also regarding some of the topics, regarding some of the enabling conditions, and how do you see this in your own respective countries. We will go through lessons learned, what enables and what not only enables, but sometimes can limit the process. We can exchange experiences, and we really hope that everybody feels welcome and really relaxed during this forum, shares their opinion, and can gain understanding that it's to be provided by our experts who are on this call. So I will start really here with a very, as I said, very brief presentation of the COP. During the presentations or right after the presentation, you're welcome to ask any questions or if something was not clear. And I want to also give you the heads up. It's not a test or exam or anything, but we'll be very happy and grateful if after the presentation, you could send in the Zoom chat just one word. How do you think you can describe the country-led planning, the COP? What comes to mind? What is one word that really describes the COP? So here I would like to walk backwards a little bit of how this all started. The first inaugural COP Connect and Reflect Forum took place last year in November in Rome, where we had the chance to meet with the COP countries and the GFOI partners and really, for the first time, connect the results and discuss all issues that come to the table for the countries of how to initiate a COP process and how to move forward. And while we all agree that it's best to meet in persons, we also very well know that that's not always possible, and it's also very pricey. So we were asked by many of you to continue with these forums and these possibilities of meeting each other and discussing. So that is how the idea for the virtual forums was born. And now we can say that this is the second virtual forum. The first one was held earlier this year, another virtual forum, and the topic was brought from the COP countries on methodological standardization and data interoperability for the NFMS. We had two guest countries, Colombia and Brazil, as well as presentations giving and sharing experiences by Fiji, Belize, Peru, and Guatemala. Today, we have structured the forum up slightly differently, with actually giving most of the time we are allocating to open discussion, which will be guided to some extent by the questions we shared in the invitation. So you have some of the questions that we thought might be good for the countries as well as the GFOI partners to start up our discussion, and then we take it from there. So what is the COP initiative? The COP initiative is the latest initiative of the GFOI, and it was started in 2023 with the idea really to create a process for countries to lead in institutionalizing and embedding their national forest monitoring systems. Very important element of the COP is the C. Every country leads based on their conditions, abilities, their political will, and they will lead with the different speed at different times. And this is very important. This is why we always emphasize that it's a process for institutionalizing. Different countries start from a different point, and it will need a different assistance as well to get to that level. So what you see here is the 10 COP countries. They joined from 2023 to 25, total of 10. And I'd like to mention them because we have worked with many of you, and we're very happy to have you today on the call as well. In 2023, we had Fiji, Guatemala, and Kenya initiate the COP process, followed by countries in 2024, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Peru, and Vietnam. And this year, only a few months ago, we're happy to welcome Belize, Cambodia, Nigeria, and Zambia. So right now you see 10 countries which the COP program of support, myself and my colleagues work hands in hands with the country to support the country-led planning. So while I emphasize that it's country-led and it's determined by the country, and because of that, it will be different for every country, there are some similarities of how countries would lead this process on national level, meaning that we provide support, and this support might look like facilitating multi-stakeholder discussions. This is something we have already assisted some of the countries that you see on this slide. Also reviving in some cases, and in others establishing a national consultations. In some countries, we have seen that coordination mechanisms, bodies have been already established. They just need to be revived. So this is another assistance we provide. Also going and commencing on technical or functional gap assessment. We have worked with FAO, National Forest Monitoring Assessment, done in some of the countries that you see on this slide as well. And then the program of support will be sitting on the side to assist the country if they decide to move forward with a deeper analysis on the functional or governance aspect of the NFMS institutionalization. Also reviewing country planning processes. This is very important, strengthening and or establishing. Again, you see the two levels depends on where the country really sits in this process. It's either starting from zero or starting with much more advanced stage. It's really irrelevant because it's country-led. The assistance will be tailored to the country's needs and the request sent back to the COP program of support. And what is the ultimate goal? At the end of the day, the country is establishing relevant legal and institutional architecture that can not just develop all elements, but sustain a national forest monitoring system. And with that, the process we would like to say is for many countries, for most, will be long and it will be taken at different pace. And it's important to understand that and not get bugged by the fact that some countries might move faster than others. At the end of the day, each country has to really put front their own interest and really move the process based on their own circumstances. Before I move forward, I just want to mention very briefly that the GFOI office is hosted by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and the funding for the COP has been secured under the FAO's Aim for Forest program, which is then funded by the UK government, their Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And we thank you. I hope some of you are on the call for the support. And this is a very busy slide that I can spend literally the full 2 hours of this forum, but I won't, no worries. I will walk you through what we call the 7 CLP steps. What you see here are the steps that the countries really take with assistance from the program of support. And here you see the 10 countries. And I hope everybody is up to speed on their flags and knowing which country was represented. So the country identification is something that happens very early in the process, and it can happen in various ways. For example, country can reach out to the COP program of support, to GFOI, and request to be really added to the COP countries. For example, Fiji was one of those countries, or it could be promoted by one of the GFOI partners, or it could be selected of a very rigorous list of countries determined by the Aim for Forest program. So that is how a country gets identified. As you see, this is the first row, and all 10 countries are already on at this stage. The next step is strategy meetings and country notification. This is a step, and these are meetings organized by the COP program of support. We tap into our GFOI partners to really learn about the country that is about to start the COP process and learn about the National Forest Monitoring System, any kind of legal agreements, any kind of reporting commitments, challenges in implementation, and all these elements that we are familiar with, that it's good to be familiar before engaging with the country. These meetings are followed by country notification, in some instances a very formal process, in others not so much. In the meantime, these steps sometimes go in parallel, sometimes they're implemented one after the other. The team, my teammates here, the program of support, we work on country briefs. These are documents, at this point, they're desktop studies of really understanding all that I just mentioned that was already initiated by communicating with our GFOI partners who have worked in these countries over the years and can provide a lot of feedback. So when the country briefs are developed, an engagement plan of how to engage with the country is also put in place. We then always share those country briefs with the country for validation. Of course, after that, the country brief is updated. And on the fourth step, you see here an exploration mission. This is the time when the program of support, myself or colleagues, travel to the country in order to really start the process, where we meet with the key identified institutions relevant for the National Forest Monitoring System. And in different countries, there are different institutions. Some are more engaged than others. We really try to meet with all key relevant partners on the ground. And you see here, step 5, the country-led implementation, there is nothing on it. this is where the process is implemented by the country and varies significantly from one to the other. So unless I provide a very thorough and deep update on all COP countries, this is why the space is left. But many of you know at what level you are, and if there are any questions following this presentation or even later on via emails, we'll be happy to communicate with you and even put you in touch with the country that's in a more advanced stage. 6 and 7, these are the steps where the global and regional forums happen. I mentioned them at the beginning already. One in person took place in November last year, one virtual June this year. This is the second virtual forum where we created this really space for the countries to be able to get together. And we really want to keep it very informal so we can talk freely and openly about success stories, but sometimes challenges. And we all know that we sometimes learn better from our mistakes than from our achievements, but our mistakes could lead us to achievements. So this is the forum established for all of us to be able to freely communicate. You see countries who have participated in these in person, and then workshops provided, and then some of the countries haven't joined, so that's why you don't see all of them participating. And then the ongoing support. The ongoing support, of course, is linked to the fact if the country has expressed interest and have asked directly assistance from the GFOI COP program of support. So this is the end of my formal presentation on the COP. As I said, it's brief because the idea is to give space for discussions. I will stop here, and I will ask you now to please put that one word that comes to mind of what the country-led planning COP is in any language of your choosing. And then if there's any questions, I will be happy to respond very quickly. And after that, as I mentioned to you at the beginning, I will have my colleague Madison assist you if you have any questions, but we'll share with you a poll. So I'll stop sharing here. And the floor is yours if you have any questions that I could answer very quickly before we move down, because the agenda and have the floor open to you, because you see we're moving pretty fast with time.
Eli, the one word, sorry, I'm going to give the word to someone that raised the hand. The one word is using the chat, the Zoom chat. Okay, they already started. There is someone with the hand raised.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for that presentation. Is a short one and very educating. But my question is, those steps, are they not in sequence? That means the country must finish one step before going to the rest, because I saw some countries skipping some steps and then moving to the next. So I was just confused if going to the global support before country implementation. So I just want to get clear on that.
Thank you. Yes, no, the steps, there's a differentiation between the part that the country leads, step 5, where I explained that there's nothing there on the slide because this is a very lengthy process for me to update you on all the progress done by the countries. The rest of the steps are really assistance from the program of support. So if a country has started the process but hasn't really created, for example, a coordination body, or they haven't progressed very much into the COP, that does not really stipulate from participating in a forum. We invite all of our COP countries to join of all forums, virtual and in person. And at the end of this forum, I will share with you the upcoming events. But the countries move at their own pace. What the steps identify really is how they move through the process on what our assistance is, what our support, how our support is organized in that respect. And then the steps and the process and the length and the speed forward is really something that the country identifies on their own.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So there's a lot of words coming. I will not comment on this. Maybe right now we move to the pole medicine. Maybe you could just give an idea and a brief how participants can use the pole. Okay, so everyone now should be able to respond. There's 3 questions. You can scroll and then submit your responses. We'll keep the poll open for roughly 5 minutes. So after that, we'll close it and we'll continue with the other topics for today's forum. I just want to also mention while you're answering, at some point would like to take a group photo, maybe at the end. That will be something my colleagues could assist us. It's always fun to do this. So at one point, we'll just ask you to turn your cameras on and so we can do a group photo from this forum. I see some responses are coming in. Please try to provide your input. We will close it within a few minutes. So we want to make sure that everybody had a chance to respond. This is the only time we'll have the poll open.
Eli, perhaps there are some people with problems to vote. So if they can use the chat to ask for
Assistance.
support, and Madis, yes.
Please let us know, as my colleague Maria Fernanda just mentioned, if you have any issues, technical in the case of providing your responses, let us know. I see responses coming. A little less people on the call, so please try to make your voice heard. Okay, so I think we are about to close the poll. I hope everybody had a chance to provide their responses. It's very interesting for us, and I'm sure for all of you to see the results, and we will share those results at the end of the towards the session. Thank you very much for all your input, and I see a lot of you are providing also the words that we asked. Very, very good. Okay, so I would like to now switch to also another presentation. And let me share my screen first. Can everybody see it? I cannot really see once I'm sharing, so I hope it's good. If not, I'm sure my colleague will let me know. I mentioned this at the beginning of the forum. We're gathered here today, despite that we're sitting all in our own homes or offices. We are together sitting and trying to bring our knowledge, bring our experiences and challenges that we are all facing in this process of institutionalizing a national forest monitoring system, um, and focusing on a central topic. The topic is enabling factors for the COP implementation. A lot of countries come back to us and ask us, what are they? Where do we start? How do we think about this process? So our team has put together a presentation that will walk you through these conditions and the key elements to launch, not only to launch, but later on sustain this process at national level. The presentation is split in two. As you could see on the left side, you will see the English, and on the right, the Spanish. I will be speaking. You still, of course, have the translation available to you. So what is the COP process? I assume by now everybody knows it since we've heard the presentation, even though being brief, and you've provided very insightful words describing it. But it's at every step, really, it's a process, as I mentioned. At every step and at every stage, different conditions have to be met. It's important to mention here that not all conditions have to be met at the beginning. And this is important to say because we don't want the countries to feel discouraged looking and hearing this presentation and thinking, okay, that is not in place for us, so maybe the COP process will be hard to really implement. No, there are some elements that have to be in place from the very beginning, but not all of them. And that is important to mention in order to move forward. What needs to be in place is a will. In this case, a political will from the country initiating a COP process. And that really comes into expressing the desire to even start the process. And it could be done in multiple ways. One is the first stages is really only an interest from the countries that have started the process to listen, to come to roundtables, to talk, and to really understand what the COP is about. even today during this presentation, when you were just sitting in your own homes or offices and you were just listening about the COP, a repetition of it or for the first time. This for the country specifically, not so much for our GFOI partners, but for the COP country is very important. Desire really and determination. So what you see here is the three elements: genuine intention. The second one is it moves, you will see it evolves from the three different elements here. From genuine intention and really just listening to understand to evolves through more of a commitment, and which is really taking the steps that it will allocate in allocating, for example, resources, right? Going into, are you going to be able to have a person dedicated or part of the time of a person and staff to really focus on moving the COP process forward? Or were there going to be legal documentations that have to be revised? Who will be doing this? How will that be done? And then goes to even deeper and more of an important factor that also needs to be into place: leadership. Without our leaders, it would be really leadership's commitment. It will be hard to move the COP process. It will be more challenging, if not impossible, right? Something that has to be done together, like the capacity to move not just the institution. In many countries, in many COP countries, is one lead institution that is involved in the National Forest Monitoring System. Not only to move your own institution, but the ability to be able to organize the other key institutions in the country that are involved in the National Forest Monitoring System, to be able to lead and to really present, so to speak, the COP to them, that they can then follow and work together into this process. So this is very important for this slide. So we're moving to more complicated concepts, but the idea stays: political will is still in place at the early stages of the process. At the beginning, there is the question of, as we call it, like to be or not to be, to do or not to do, right? To embark on this process or not to embark. Once you have set and listened to what the COP is, what it will take, where the political will is going to come from, would you be able to have the leadership? As this really is to answer this question, again, at least one institution in the country, as I mentioned, the lead institution, that needs to express this interest in continuously to learn and to continue learning about the COP in order really to see if it's something that the country can benefit from this process, to something that all different key institutions can benefit from, not just the lead institutions, right? And I want to make an important point here that political will doesn't always come from the heads of the institutions. Very often we see these examples and we work with different teams, and sometimes this first initial reach out to us, for example, it's done through more technical stuff and experts who reach out, and they're the ones who have seen the issues and challenges, and they reach out to us and they express this desire to really start this process, to look deeper in more of a governance or legal aspects of the National Forest Monitoring System. So again, not always starting from the highest level. And then what needs to happen is this dialogue, the dialogue between the technical staff that has expressed this desire and has seen the benefits of a COP process for the country, to really bring it to the decision makers in the institution. And this is why in a lot of our forums so far, you see, and we're very much engaged with the technical experts in all institutions, because they're the driving wheel behind this. These are the people who then can bring them to their decision makers, right? So the political, so this is a process, and the commitments from the institution is like a effort that comes from different levels to move this process forward, from technical staff to decision makers. Again, we talk about commitments, and with commitments, the leadership level has to be there. So if the leadership level of one institution is already, so to speak, secured, then you need to move to the level when this institution, the leadership of that specific institution, then can reach out to other institutions and not just do this process in silo, not just lead alone and then leave the other institutions that are very critical for any national forest monitoring system to be sustainable, to be embedded. Without the other institution, this process will be hard to move forward. So the commitments is this, again, taking these binding steps. The leadership, we're relying on the vision and the initiative of the leaders in these institutions and the ability to mobilize others. That's a very important point, and we want to make it clear during this presentation and later on when we move to the discussion. And this is a busy slide, but an important one. And you probably remember from the CLP presentation, I mentioned two things. Either a coordination body is in existence in the country that has some level of ability to really have the different institutions coordinate. They meet at certain time intervals, or there is another structure to which the different institutions communicate. And if that body has been in place and needs to be revived is one option. The other is to establish such a body from the beginning. So here we need to look into these formal and informal communications. It doesn't have to start with everything being formal, but at some point during this process, the things need to become more structured and clear to be able to understand by the other institutions that will be changing. It's not about simply who does what, but how this is going to advance advance it with some kind of framework that it will be put in place, right? Also, understanding the context is a very, very important thing that I want to mention on this slide. Everybody needs to understand the context of which they're working. And I mentioned for different countries, that is a different context, different circumstances. What are their communications? What are their processes that have already been put in place? Also, moving, and I don't want anybody to take this wrong. This is not based on something we've seen in countries, but it's something to really always be aware. Moving from competition to coordination. It's important for the different institutions. We have seen this in some of the countries where sometimes they are overlapping roles, or there's not the best coordination in place, and sometimes it's really not the best understanding of who why competing when we can coordinate, right? So this is also something I want to emphasize here. And this process needs to get to a point when there is a joint roadmap. This is not for anything external. This is talking only how the country can move its own country-led planning process for institutionalizing NFMS, to have its own roadmap of how it will be a joint roadmap among all key institutions in the country. Legal framework is also very important to be considered in this, and I'm happy to say that we have experts with whom we work, legal experts and governance experts. If any of you have specific questions, then we'll try our best to answer them at the end of the presentation and during the discussion. The legal framework needs to be built during the process. So you see now how it's like building a house. We're putting at the beginning, not much needs to be in place. We just need to listen to each other. We need to understand what we're trying to build, but slowly the elements have to come into place, and the legal framework is very important. For example, all decrees, laws, and agreements have to be formalized, and roles and responsibilities among the different institutions have to be aligned. Because in some cases, legal framework exists in silos, and the different institutions have a very well-established legal framework, but it's not that joint roadmap that I mentioned. It's not really an effort done by all and really in a coordination. So this is another element that needs to be added, another brick, as if you think, into building the CLP process and moving it forward. This is, so to speak, a main one and a very important one because it relates a complicated part of the system, the legal framework, to the ability of a leadership, which comes from the political will and the ability to engage with all other institutions that are key in this whole process. So you can see how this is very essential. Here, the sustainable financing. So often when we work with countries, we try not to go directly into the money question because the minute the money comes into place, everybody says we can use more. We all can use more. The problem is that is really the money the only challenge we are seeing in order to progress into institutionalizing a national forest monitoring system, or there are many other things that could be put into place to really move the process forward. So this is why we have this slide here, and it says sustainable financing. Allocation of national budgets, they have to be thought from a long-term perspective, financial strategies that can be put in a way, for example, all of you are already familiar with the REDD+ benefit sharing, domestic carbon markets, and so forth. That's something that really enables the country to, while still relying on external funding, to reduce it to extent that it's sustainable to the country to move forward in case that funding is being reduced or eliminated at any point in the process. So it's a balancing act also between different priorities that every country has. We have spoken to many of you, and while we all love trees and we would like to protect the environment and everything, there are other priorities the countries have to think about, and sometimes the budget is one. So here we see that this has to be taken into consideration, because if this is not really discussed at this point, that there might be not really a clear picture of how much it will be needed. Would there really be need for additional funding or not, and where it's going to come from? Balancing is hard between all priorities the country might set, dealing with budget cuts, which happen often, and all this needs to be linked together to this idea of financial sustainable financing, right? Managing, if I have to close the slide, is managing really the priorities of a national forest monitoring system and all the other priorities that the country has set for itself. And what are some other enabling factors? And I'm sure here, as you can see with the presentation, we're going more towards enabling you to share with us, but you are all familiar, and maybe you can even add to that presentations when we start talking technical and human capacity. We need to really these are the additional elements, right? There's already many that we've mentioned. These are the additional that help enable the NFMS and depend on the enabling factors and the political will. It's important here, and I want to mention the partnerships with academia and the research centers. And as you well know, as part of the GFOI, we have research and development component. We always reach out to those people who advance the technology so we can help our countries as well. So these are elements to also consider. Inclusion is a big factor in the process, and really to make sure that it will be successful. Engagement of local governments, also something we hear over and over, communities, indigenous people, civil society, and nobody wants to say that this is an easy process, but it needs to be put up front so it could be addressed. And with this, I would like to wrap up our presentation, and we of course can go into questions. I hope there's some in the chat already listed. As you probably remember, when you received the invitation for the forum, we shared with you some initial questions. So before we go into these questions, they're just guiding questions. As if any of you would like to ask any of us regarding the presentation, that's fine. We can also focus on these questions. But I think it will be very interesting to see what came back from the poll, to see what you provided as an input to the questions that we asked you, and then we can move through these questions that hopefully you had a chance to go through. You have some ideas that you want to share, or some questions that we can all discuss. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and you can follow us on the social media. And you can always reach back to me or my colleagues, and the email address is the GFOI office. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing for now.
Ah, no. Hello?
Hello? Would it be possible to share the results of the poll at this point? Madison, maybe you can help us?
They should be visible now. Let me know if not.
Yep. Okay. So
Oh.
can everybody see the results? I will go briefly over what we're seeing and what I'm seeing on my screen. Hopefully you're seeing the same. The first question was, how familiar are you with the COP initiative? I'm very happy to hear that this is the lowest number. So most of the people on the call are familiar with the COP. That's great. Most of you have 74% of the votes that came in have a basic knowledge. That's also good. We were hoping for this kind of result, that it's not new to most or many of you, and some of you have really an advanced understanding and have been actively engaged in the process. This is much less. I assume these responses come from the COP countries who have started the process a bit earlier. I wanted to mention something at the beginning. Maybe this is the time if somebody was wondering, because the question came at the beginning about the steps and everything. And I want to mention that on this call, you're not going to see many of our participating countries from the Asia Pacific, because the timing is not ideal. The forums are usually scheduled to be a good time and suitable for two regions at the time. This time are focused on Latin American, Caribbean, and Africa. So this is the only reason we don't really see strong participation from the three countries in Asia Pacific. So to get back to the poll, the next question was, what stage do you consider your country is currently at regarding the COP process? The options here were more than on the previous one, a little bit more complex, but they're distributed interestingly between some are not sure, and that might be or not applicable answers from our GFOI partners, but also from the other answers are they're starting to learn. Okay, 36%. The decision to start a COP process has recently been being made, and that's also a pretty substantial input. So that's very interesting for us. And then the last question is, which factors do you consider most important for in initiating and sustaining a COP process? So this is where I could provide, just read out the responses, but most importantly, we'll be here for any of you on the call to jump in and to express or ask questions about it. Political will, it comes as the highest, and I'm glad to hear that, because I believe if this came very clearly through the presentation, political will is a very important factor, one of the elements that needs to be into place from the very beginning. The other one, institutional coordination also, and I also want to mention this is very good because these results came before the presentation, so this is a very nice alignment between the the slides that we provided, the theoretical background on the COP and how countries perceive this. So it's good to see we're on the same page. Stakeholder engagement, also very good, as I mentioned towards the end, engaging with the communities, with indigenous people and so forth. And the financial sustainability comes lower on the list, but also there. So thank you very much. This is fantastic. If any of my colleagues would like to jump in and say a few words, that would be great. Or if any of you have a question, please feel free to express it.
Ellie, we do have questions in the chat. Perhaps you can read and conduct to addressing those questions.
Yes, okay. Okay, so should I say something about the word that was picked about what COP is, or are we going to mention this at the end? Because I like what I see. Collaboration, inclusiveness, empowerment, partnership, sustainability. This is all things that we were hoping is how countries perceive that. There are a few questions. I will read them out loud and we can go from there. We have a question from a colleague. Nice to have you on the call, Siam, from Zambia. What guidance can GFOI offer in developing a practical 6 to 12 months action roadmap that aligns COP implementation with Zambia's policy rollout, ensuring NFMS is embedded in permanent institutional structures, reporting systems, and interagency coordination mechanism? Excellent question. I can jump into that question because I lead actually on Zambia and had the pleasure to lead the exploration mission jointly done with colleagues from FAO and Aim for Forest and colleagues from the British government as well. And we started these discussions on the ground of how the country receive assistance. And during these discussions, one thing that came was this idea of delivering multi-stakeholder discussions where all the key institutions, as I mentioned in the presentation, can come together, talk about what is the common vision.
Yeah, thank you.
Common vision for the COP. This is the first step, really. From there on, the specific case for Zambia, as I mentioned, looking into existing assessments. So for Zambia specifically, FAO National Forest Monitoring Assessment has been done for NFMS, and the COP comes really as a support and to really go deeper into looking into institutional and governance questions that might have not been answered by that assessment. And based on that first initial workshop and then following, if the country is interested in conducting functional gap assessment, could create a roadmap which will be able to address the technical gaps addressed by the NFMS assessment done, followed by a governance assessment. So this is really in a nutshell how this is implemented directly to the case in Zambia. And then the second question that Sylvester, you had is what technical or advisory support can GFOI provide to help Zambia translate the provisions of a new national forestry policy 2025 into enforceable regulations or statutory instruments that institutionalize NFMS within the legal framework? Another part of the discussions we had when we were there, and this is actually the moment when we really started to discuss with our colleagues in the FAO office in Zambia, as well as our experts on the GFOI community, how to bring legal experts to be able to assist the country in really looking through these documentations, make sure they align. There's no repetition in the legal structure, as I mentioned during the presentation, that one institution have their very robust legal framework and all roles and responsibilities identified, but there might be gap in the fact that there's an overlap between different institutions. And I will stop here. I hope I answered them. The other question that I see is from Willem Octayo. Nice to have you on the call. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. I would not try to read it or answer it for that matter. So ask my colleagues to read out the question out loud and have it translate, and I will use my translator for that part. Thanks.
Gabi, can you read it and hand it to Marco and Francesca, please? Because my internet is not so good.
Ok, gracias, Maffer. La pregunta de William es la siguiente.
William's question is as follows. In Peru, there's political will and other facilitating elements that are present, but we have a very big problem. There are two entities that share powers over the monitoring of forests as resources and ecosystem. What can we do in this particular case? I would like to have some initial advice, if you please. It's one of the topics that we must work on for the CLP project in Peru. So maybe we can have the experts try to answer that. Let me ask if Marco or Francesca are ready to answer that question. Maybe we can have a little debate about it. I'll give the floor to any of the two who would like to interject, or Ellie as well.
I can jump in if you want. Francesca, do you want to go first? No? Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Marco Mezzera. I'm a governance expert with the CLP team. Yeah, thanks a lot for this question, and good to read from you, William, again, after having met you last year in November. Just briefly about your question, I think what you're pointing out is if I may say, a classical case of overlapping mandates or competing mandates. And this is, I'm saying, a classical case because we are seeing this as a major issue in other countries as well. And what CLP can do in this case is, I mean, we don't come with a silver bullet. It's not like we have a key to solve these issues. But I think what is important is to understand where some of these functional challenges come from. I think you start with a statement that is very important. And so you acknowledge that on the side of the government of Peru, there is the political will to strengthen and embed the National Forest Monitoring System as a stable and sustainable institution. So as you've seen from the presentation that was given before by Ellie, political will came back like a few times as the enabling factor. And I think without without a political will from the country in embedding the National Forest Monitoring System within its own institution, you hardly can do anything else. I mean, you can touch on the technical side of things, but if you're looking for long-term sustainable institutions, then you really need some sort of political sustainable backup support. So I think you're already starting in a better position compared maybe to other countries. So in terms of realizing or addressing this issue of the overlapping mandates, I can start mentioning two things. First of all, diagnostics help. So understanding the context, the institutional context, and why certain sort of situations have come to existence can help. Sometimes things get sort of fossilized in the way institutions work or do not work with each other, that people that are in these institutions don't even longer know why certain sort of difficulties or challenges have started to begin with. So a good analysis, not only of which institutions according to the law or to legal framework should be responsible, but why certain habits have emerged, so why certain institutions are taking responsibilities. And often, as Ellie was mentioning in her presentation, there is the formal side of things and there is the informal side of things. Maybe strong personality in some directorates or some agencies have created a situation whereby an agency that maybe on paper were not supposed to take certain responsibilities has reached a position where it's doing that. So that sort of analysis, that sort of diagnostics is fundamental. And that's again why Ellie was mentioning among the elements of one of the enabling factor, the institutional coordination, that the understanding of the context is key. So the CLP can help with that because as a sort of external agency, FAO does the same. We have a facilitating role often, and the facilitating role can work exactly in this sort of area. So trying to first recognize what the issue is and trying to understand what the causes are for the challenges that has emerged. Then as following up steps, and Ellie also mentioned that in the presentation, is the convening role that again, the CLP GFOI can do, that FAO does. So the convening of could be maybe a technical workshop, that could be a sort of multi-stakeholders dialogue, but places, safe spaces where people from different institutions can come together and start addressing this issue. And that it may sound like a self-evident thing, but experience tells that a lot of people working in these institutions don't often have opportunities to interact in a safe space in an open way. So these are the sort of things that could facilitate this challenge. I'm not saying that it's a piece of cake and that thanks to the CLP, all these problems will be solved. But yeah, this is, I think, is the sort of functional surface where the CLP can move and can try to help out with. But again, really an important precondition is that on your side, on the side of the government, on the side of the country, there is really the political will to address these issues institutionally. And there is a clear vision of where the country wants to go with the National Forest Monitoring System. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Maybe Francesca, if you would like to come in. Francesca is our colleague from FAO and a legal expert.
Gracias, Eli. Quizás voy a tratar
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you very much. I'll do my best to answer to William's question in Spanish. I will use the interpretation services. Now, I would like to add to what Marco has shared. Marco has shared the basic elements needed to address a challenge. But if I may, I would like to add some food for thought. On the one hand, in order to identify the terms of reference, we need to identify what are the guiding principles. That is to say, as an NFM, what do we want to achieve? What is actually needed from an NFMS? It has to be operable, it has to be tailored to local customs. It must bear in mind that each institution has its own capabilities, has its own budget, and it has, of course, its own history, it has its own resources and staff. So those are the basic elements to identify what could be included in an NFMS, a system that would last, because those are elements that need to be considered in terms of what is specified in the terms of reference. Is there an act? Is there a law? What are those instruments that could be used to solve those differences? For example, is an agreement a solution, or is there a protocol that could be used? Maybe a protocol would help the institutions work together. What I mean is basically to identify institutionally what is already there. And after that, after each institution has identified its scope, it would be easier to work with the leadership and establish the very basic elements. So in terms of the legal aspect of this process, of course, it's a basic. We have to identify if there is a Forest Act. We would have to work on the basis of principles and guidelines, what are probably what the secondary legislation identifies, and those could be also used to identify what could be done depending on the context. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you,
William?
Francesca. Yes, as
Ellie,
Marco.
perhaps check if both responses have been okay for William and for the colleagues in Zambia.
Yeah, let us know.
Okay.
Okay for us.
Okay, thank you. I think what Marco really mentioned, and it's important to know, it's not an easy process, and this is why it's important to have the will, because then the COP could provide resources or experts to come and work with whatever issues the different countries might be facing. So the process will really be tailored to the different countries, and where the starting point is also be different. I see another question in the chat. It's also in Spanish, so I'll ask my colleague Gabriela to read it out and the translators to help us with interpretation. And then when I also figure out what the question is about, we'll see who can help answering it. Thanks.
Okay, Eli. Daniel
Of course,
Castillo
Ellie.
de Perú
This is
pregunta,
the question
¿hay
from Daniel
aspectos que están
Castillo from Peru.
relacionados, por
There are
ejemplo,
some aspects that
la
are
voluntad, la
related, and I'll
voluntad
use an
política debe
example related
decantar en las
to
coordinaciones
political
institucionales y
will.
los marcos
And of
legales?
course, that
Esto
political
ayuda a
will has
poder
to
seguir
be
dar pasos
aligned
adelante y
to
no
what
retroceder.
institutionals
Es
can
un
do
comentario.
together, and this should be the basis to move forward, not to step back. This is more a comment than a question.
Tal vez Daniel quiera ampliarlo.
Maybe, Daniel, would you like to elaborate on your comment?
Sí, buenos días desde aquí de Perú.
Good
¿Me escuchan?
morning. I'm connecting from Peru. Can you hear me? Can you
Te
confirm that you
escuchamos.
hear me? We do
Sí,
hear
bueno,
you,
solo quería
Miss
comentar un
Maria.
aspecto que me parece importante, ¿no? La
If I
voluntad
may, I
política,
would like to emphasize that
si solo se queda en ese aspecto,
if
puede
political
ser
will is
momentáneo,
only
¿no? Puede ser
expressed,
intermitente.
it can fade away
Entonces la voluntad
and
política lo
can
que,
come
a
back
lo
in
que
the
me refiero es que debe
future. But
traducirse
what I'm
quizás
trying to say is that
en justamente las
political will
coordinaciones institucionales que
should
permiten
be
dar
tagged
paso a
along
los
with
marcos
actions.
legales
That is
ya
to say
acordados, ya
that
consensuados
institutions
y que
coordinate
surgieron a
efforts,
partir justamente de esa
make use
voluntad
of the
política de
frameworks,
articulación,
and
todo,
expressing
¿no?
political will should
Entonces,
be
eso me parece importante. O sea, por
tagged
eso
to
quería
actions.
establecer
That's
esta
why
relación
that
entre
I
uno y
shared
otro
my
aspecto,
comment. I
¿no?
would like
Que
to
es
make
como una
this
cadena.
connection
Porque la
between
voluntad política por sí
political
sola
will and
y
actions
aislada quizás puede
because
estar en un momento
it
y después en
might
otro
be
momento
around,
no,
but
pueden ser
probably
intermitentes
political
también,
will
¿no?
might
Entonces,
fade away
para
depending
que
on the
eso
circumstances.
plasme y permita
So,
avanzar,
in order to
debe
make progress,
decantarse en estos
what I was
aspectos que
trying
les
to
indicaba,
say
¿no?
is that any political will expression should be translated into actions. Thank you.
We have
Gracias,
Marco,
Daniel.
your hands up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. I just wanted to reply to Daniel's comment. Yeah, point taken, very important. I think the issue of political will, though, referred mainly to the sort of right intersection of a CLP process being implemented in a country. So the CLP has, as the word says, has to be led by the country. So the moment we start with this collaboration with the country, that's when the issue of political will becomes really determinant. So on the longer term, you're absolutely right. You know, we are subject to political upheavals, and one government may not follow the road of the next one. But when the CLP starts a conversation with the country and they talk about the need to strengthen and develop sustainable national forest monitoring system, that decision needs to come from the country. So that's where the political will is requested, at least in that period of time. Then how temporary that will be, nobody knows. But there needs to be that sort of political commitment. Then, of course, if you want to really achieve those sustainable national forest monitoring system, it becomes very important what you say, that the political will is not left to itself, but that there are, as also Francesca was saying, that there are processes that build institutions and mechanisms that stay hopefully for the very longer term. So that link is absolutely important. But I just wanted to clarify this issue of the political will in the context of the CLP and the implementation of the program in the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I see, as you all see, very little screens, but it seems like Francesca might be willing to come in. I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't. It just seems like you're very engaged and wanting to also add to that. Please come in if you would like to. If not, I can move with the other questions.
But very quickly, maybe, as also Marco was saying, in addition to the political will, it is indeed important to ensure that in the long term, those processes can be formalized in order to foster and enhance sustainability. Particularly of the functioning of the national forest monitoring system. And in that very regard, particularly as it concerns, the potential risk of fragmentation or overlaps with other institutional mandates, there's, I think, a key word that may come out here, and it is the word integration. So we see more and more the need to look beyond forests, to look also and try to integrate information systems that look at the agriculture sector, environmental sector, how those how drivers of deforestation are linked, with the forest sector. And we have some very good examples of countries like Costa Rica that have managed to set in place an interoperability type of information system that tries to unify those different information systems and make them operate as one system. So that's also, I think, quite challenging, but maybe a forthcoming solution for overcoming those challenges. Thanks.
Thanks, Francesca. So I was right to point to you. You had a very, very important point about integration, and another point you made, which is something we hear more and more, is looking in other information systems, because the countries don't focus only on forestry, and often we see among institutions saying, well, we're the leading institution because in the NFMS there's the F part and everybody is focusing on forest. But if we can really, I'm sorry, if you haven't muted your microphones and you're not speaking, could you please? Thank you. Then if we can look into other systems and even, for example, how they function and how they manage some of these in integration and interoperability, it's also a way of being able to assist the country. I would like to ask, if possible, we have a question in the chat from Brian. Brian, could you please ask your question that way? Because the question is actually for the other countries. It would be better to really ask it out loud, and then they could spur the discussion from countries like Guatemala and Peru that can give you a bit more feedback of how their process has been going on to a country that's starting and has started recently. Brian, can you unmute yourself and ask it? If not possible or feasible, I will read it out loud, not a problem. The question.
Hello.
Hi.
Are you able to get me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yes. My question relates to those countries that are advanced in the CLP process. I would want to just know how they have been able to successfully establish sustainable institution and financing mechanism to maintain the national forest monitoring system beyond donor support. I think what is coming out critically is the budget to support the process for continuous national forest monitoring. So how have they been able to do that? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. And since the question was pointed towards the countries who have been involved in the COP process, I would really encourage those colleagues on the call who might be able to provide I don't want to put you on the spot to really give the picture of how it worked and it's all set and done, because that's not the case with any of the countries on the call, really. But the countries who have had a bit more experience in the process, what are the steps that you have taken? Like in Guatemala, we've seen a reviving of existing coordination bodies and having the institutions speaking to each other, looking into legal frameworks and so forth. So it would be really nice if you can share your experience with country that has recently joined, such as Zambia. Thank you. Anyone? As I said, it doesn't have to be a prescription of we did this, this, and this, and it's all done and we're ready. It's just, I think what Brian is trying to get more is, where do you even start? What have you done, or what are the things you can share with us, because we're the new the added country to the COP process. That would be of value. This is the idea pretty much behind these forums, to share, and as I said at the beginning, sharing challenges sometimes is much more valuable than just sharing just the success stories, because we can learn a lot from shared challenges, which sometimes are those that are very common between the different countries.
Hi, Ellie. I
Hello.
speak in Spanish.
That's fine, Ken said. Someday I'll learn it. Go ahead. For now, use translation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Quisiera compartir con un poco la experiencia de
I would
Guatemala.
like
El
to
CLP
share
nos ha dado
the experience in Guatemala. Working with the CLP has given us the opportunity to have conversations with experts and specialists from other agencies that are in the process of monitoring forests. This is one of the great opportunities that I can share. We have been able to talk about policies, about technical aspects of forest monitoring. We have been able to create definitions, to analyze all the legal scaffolding, all the capabilities that we have in our institutions, and that was the first step to come up with our own NFMS. So basically, what we have done has helped us to identify other policies that we could use in Guatemala. So this is one of the benefits stemming out from the work we have done with the support of the CLP. And this is a nonstop process. We're still working on, and we believe that the road is long, but we are working on a roadmap. And by having the roadmap, our country will walk towards having our own national forest monitoring system. Thank you.
Gracias, Kenset.
I
love your response, and the phrase of a non-stop process and the road is long. This is true for all countries, and Guatemala has started, as I mentioned, the first three, just to remind you, Kenya, Guatemala, and Fiji. And in all these countries, all these three countries, the main things were just to be able to, as Kenset mentioned, to speak with each other from the different institutions and to start talking about these elements that need to be into place, to talk and take apart the legal framework and looking into and be able to understand what might need to be put into place, identifying stuff, really the elements that I've mentioned in the presentation earlier on the call. So, Brian, did this answer your question? Did it give you an idea of first of all, that the process is a non-stop in order for the country to have a sustainable NFMS and to reduce the reliance on external funding? The process needs to continue for many years to come, and then the road is long. did this touch at least to some extent to what you were asking? And then others who have been walking this road, please come in as well. Maybe colleagues from the other COP countries would like to share. And as I said, we're not looking for success stories. We're looking for how you're overcoming challenges that we all face. Eliseo, please come in.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Buenos días, colegas.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I wanted to add something to what has been said by Guatemala, to what Kesa just said. I wanted to share that in addition to what has been said already, last year we carried out an analysis of gaps to identify different roles and different actors involved in this governance system that could be associated to the MRB processes, which is also related to the Red Plus and Follow. So this has basically just added on to that review that we were carrying out of the legal framework and the system that we put in place last year. So this is part of this governance that we've been analyzing together with Rainfall Forest, our partner, and we've been working hand in hand in order to see how we can carry out this analysis of the gaps, the existing gaps, and share this with the government, and then work together with the government in that governance system and see how the different institutions can have different roles and how we can involve all actors into these different systems, regulations, all the internal rules. And this is what we're doing at present, and it's the exercise that we're carrying out at present in order to institutionalize the NFMS in the country from the institutions, from the inside, so that it is a sustainable system in the long term. That's our main objective, and that's the process that we're following at present. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Eliseo. Great response there. And as we were talking again, the steps is what we're looking, the challenges and how far the countries have gone from the beginning and how they are willing, they're having the political will to really walk this process that, as Ken said, the non-stop process, it evolves. We've heard from our experts, we've heard from the countries who have been involved a little longer, and questions from colleagues from Zambia, which joined the COP process only a few months ago. Any of the other countries on the call, please, this is really the time for you to ask any questions. And as I said, we have a governance and a legal expert on the call that they could potentially provide some guidance or clear some of the questions that you might have. That would be the time for this. I don't see any questions in the chat, but please just feel free to speak up, or maybe Francesca, if you would like to give an overview, because everybody, when it comes to setting the legal framework for the countries and really avoiding fragmentation and looking into institutional mandates that are in place but might not be, might still look in a fragmented scheme, could you maybe provide some guidance, not so much, but feedback to countries? How can this be avoided? Because we all know the institutions are in place, they have their own worlds to deal with all their mandates and then staffing and the different budgets and so forth. How could this be done? Where do they start? And I think this goes back a little bit to the original question raised by Sylvester from Zambia. How do we do this? We have now one document. How can this be the document for the whole country? And we saw this during the exploration mission in Zambia. There is the will. There's also a coordination body where the different institutions meet. But then how does this get to the more challenging part of really creating this legal framework that all will work together? Because the elements are, even if they're in place, they sometimes feel a little disconnected. How can a country not feel overwhelmed by all these elements that have to be taken into account?
Sure, Elian, thanks for the question. And by the way, as it refers to the Zambian context, early this year, we have been providing some inputs in the context of the review of the Forest Act. We understand that that there has been a process ongoing aiming to review and update the Forest Act of Zambia, which dates from 2015. And on that very occasion, I was asked to provide some inputs within the Forest Act that would bring in some elements clarifying how an FMS should be functioning, and try to anchor those elements in the Forest Act. So what I did, I have to say that on that very occasion, the timeline for providing such inputs was quite tight. But what I did was to look at, for example, the set of definitions that we need to know and that need to be set in place in a normative instrument. And I try to incorporate those definitions within the Forest Act. And then I looked at the different provisions already existing in the Forest Act that were somehow related with the monitoring system and its functioning. And I tried just to elaborate on those provisions to provide more elements that would guide later on the legislators who would then set in place the regulations in trying to understand what are the main principles, what are the elements that should be considered when developing such secondary legislation. So that was an exercise that we did. And by the way, I would be very interested to know, if those elements are still in place in the updated version of the Forest Act. But then comes the most challenging part, indeed, and it is to understand really, how to make it operational, how to overcome those challenges related with, the lack of trust that, for example, is a strong challenge, and between those institutions. Another challenge often is related with the need to understand what will be the use of those data. Another challenge is to understand, how to enhance transparency in the collection, management, use, and generation of those forest data. And why should we enhance such transparency and accessibility of forest data? So for that, to happen, you need to look, in fact, at the broader set of instruments, legal instruments that are in place. Sometimes it goes beyond the forest legislation itself. So you may need to look at, for example, the access of information law or legislation that is in place in the country to understand, what is already mentioned in there, what are those guiding principles that we need, to incorporate in a forest instrument dealing with an NFMS that may, we need to build on in order to enhance trust among the institutions, trust among the actors, the final users of this forest data, and trust among the policymakers, because ultimately what we want is to develop a sound NFMS, to enhance its sustainability, and to improve, the quality and of the data that is collected, in order to also better inform policy making processes. So for this to happen, indeed, there is, kind of a desk review process that you will start doing, as colleagues from Guatemala just said. So you will look at the set of legislation that exists in that country at different level, whether we talk about forest acts or secondary types of legislation or administrative or internal rules that establishes the functioning within a particular institution, and try to map out, what is there in terms of legal instruments. So there are national repositories that are set in place. There's, those global databases like FOWLEX, sorry, that are extremely useful. And what we did ourselves was also to develop a checklist, a detailed outline to help guiding, this desk review. So you try to, think about what type of questions I would like to answer, by setting in place a regulation that clarifies the functioning of an NFMS. Of course, one of those questions is to bring clarity in terms of roles, mandates, and responsibilities of the different institutions that are part of the NFMS. There are other aspects that deal with the financial aspect, with the accessibility, with the quality of those data. And so what we did in supporting countries in developing regulatory instruments was to clarify a stepwise approach that we would undertake in order to come out with a set of recommendations based on this gap assessment. Gap assessment that will look at the legal instruments, but we would also accompany this desk review process with also the need to organize interviews with key actors. So as we know, most of those processes are informal. In certain countries, they will tell you, well, it works well. We don't need to formalize such process because it's okay as it is. But then you realize that it doesn't bring sustainability, it doesn't bring ownership, which is also very important. So by formalizing the functioning of an NFMS, you are bringing ownership to the institutions. And so we organized those set of interviews, so consultation processes to understand what's the perspective of different categories of actors that are involved in developing such NFMS. And then, of course, we would develop a set of options, a set of recommendations in order to overcome gaps or constraints that have been identified. And we ultimately try to organize a kind of a validation workshop where we would invite all those representatives of those institutions that have a role in the NFMS to discuss together around the same table about those gaps, about those potential solutions, and try to jointly figure out what's the most pertinent, accurate instrument that would may needed to overcome those challenges. So sometimes you need to think about setting in place a regulation. Sometimes we think about soft law instruments, such as a protocol, a memorandum of understanding. But I think it's all about communication and building trust. That's extremely important. Thank you.
Thanks, Francesca. Fantastic. You said a lot of things. I am not so sure if all of our participants got all that. It's fantastic. We first of all will share the recording and also the keynotes. So I'm sure many of the countries on this call would like to be able to refer to what you just provided as a feedback, talking about a very interesting thing you mentioned about the informal discussions that were mentioned also by the countries that sometimes we value because it comes into personal communication and it's good enough at the point, but then we need to actually bring it to more formal level to really be able to have that ownership to the country. And this is a very important point. I want to mention that Francesca, and thank you for the input. We consider her like one of the experts that we tap into on the legal side when countries come back to us. She's a colleague from FAO, and we have at the beginning started with this idea of pool of experts because we all bring different parts of the knowledge that could assist the country. So the idea was to really communicate with the countries under the CLP. And when such questions come that none of us could answer, then we tap in an expert that could provide those answers and maybe further on work with the country on the specificity. And you have heard that Francesca is already engaged with Zambia, so that's something how we assist countries when they have questions. Thank you so much. I see a new question in the chat. The question comes from Nigeria. Emmanuel, if you don't mind just coming in and asking it, or if you, that would be great. And maybe my colleague Marco Metzera can answer because he's the one leading on Nigeria. Would be very nice. And then we have okay, before I read the question, I'm sorry, we have hands up by Brian. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for organizing this meeting and for the wonderful presentations. I think mine is a small one. After looking at this and just to create a pool of knowledge, is it possible to create a community of practice so that others can share, actually for us who are just starting, so that we can quickly catch up to see what modalities are put in place for their NFMS to start running, so that it can be easier for us to, even just on a community of practice, can be email basis, a SharePoint, so that we learn these ideas and see how we can, the idea, if others have done it, we can just, instead of inventing a wheel, we can learn from them quickly and try to see how we can also develop our country-led programs quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yes, excellent question. This is a part of the idea even behind those virtual forums is exactly so the countries can meet, and we would like to take it even further. There's been always the idea of having these some of the meetings that we organize are global and others will in the future be regional, and that will be very interesting to tap into similar experiences of countries in the region, not only globally. But the community of practice is really, this is one of the spots where you can reach to other countries. As I said, the modality of this specific forum is set as a discussion based on the central topic. Previous one, the workshop or the forum that we organized in June was with presentations from the different countries where they actually provided their steps that they have taken towards institutionalizing NFMS. What are the challenges, what they have done, and the countries who were participating were able to ask questions, get in touch with them. This is exactly the role of the COP program of support, to put in touch not just country and the program that we could provide targeted assistance, but also to strengthen the South-South coordination collaboration between the countries on a regional and global scale. So if you at any point feel like this will be beneficial, please join those forums as you're doing now. And I will mention at the end the next one coming in October, but I don't want to jump at this point. But thanks for bringing it up, and it's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So hopefully with Zambia joining now this year, you will start feeling part of the COP community. We have a question, as I mentioned, from Nigeria, from Emmanuel. Maybe either please come in if you'd like to ask it directly, or I can read it out loud. That's okay. Maybe not possible. So I think I will read it out loud. Nigeria is at the elementary stage of institutionalizing the national forest monitoring. We would love to understand the step-by-step procedure of implementing it and possibly hear some success stories of countries that have successfully implemented theirs. I think the first part might be able to be answered by my colleague Marco Metzera, who leads the implementation of the COP program of support and provides assistance to Nigeria. And the second one, I think to some extent was some feedback, some stories have been shared so far by colleagues in Guatemala. Of course, the floor is open. This is exactly what this forum is trying to do, to have the countries talk to each other directly and for us to just facilitate this discussion. Marco, maybe you could comment just briefly on the first part of the question regarding the understanding or how we can explain us which are the step-by-step procedures of implementing it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. Yeah, I could, but I think that Emmanuel is intention is to discuss really the step-by-step institutionalization of a national forest monitoring system, which is not the step-by-step application of implementation of the CLP initiative. So that's why I was also hoping that some other colleagues on this call could respond, because it's not for me to share these stories, and I in general I don't have the knowledge of these things. So, but what I can say, just as a brief reaction, is that so having followed lately Nigeria in this trajectory, and having read a bit in the institutional side of things, I've seen indeed that the last, let's say, 10 years, there has been quite an effort to at least build an understanding and a sort of initial roadmap on how to get to a sustainable national forest monitoring system. But these are, as Emmanuel is saying, those very initial steps. There is much more that needs to be done. I think having been there in Nigeria last July and having interacted with a lot of you, I think I've seen some familiar names on this call. The ground is fertile, and the CLP could help facilitate a few things. As I said, some of the conversation among you, between you and other colleagues in other countries, and that's what Ellie was referring to, and I don't want to spoil it because I think she was mentioning something like that, but just to look backwards, November last year in 24, we had this global CLP forum here in Rome, and I saw very interesting dynamics of exchanges of questions and answers and experiences among the representatives of the 5 countries that were here in Rome. So, and I understand that a virtual forum is a bit less conducive probably to this sort of peer exchanges. It's a bit more, you don't have the coffee on the table where you can chat with each other. But the idea is precisely that, so that other colleagues can come in and share their experiences. But what I can say from the CLP side is that the relation has just started. Not even officially, if I may say, but I perceived a lot of interest on your side, on the Nigeria side, on some of the colleagues again. And the initial step for me would always be, as I said before, do your homework in terms of understanding the context. And this is not for me or for us, but it's also for you. So that's one of the initial steps that I would suggest the CLP could facilitate, a kind of deeper analysis, an analysis that goes deeper into governance and functional issues than the one that some of you again witnessed during the workshop that discussed, among others, the institutional arrangements. That was part of the FAO and FMS assessment tool, again, was discussed in the end of July in Abuja. So the CLP wants to go further. We have developed our own tool that looks into these issues, into these functional institutional governance issues. And this is, again, for us, is one of the initial steps to better understand the context and start thinking about the issues that are there and how we could solve them. But again, the other part of the questions Ellie was saying, it's not for me to answer. So I hope maybe somebody else in this room may be able, maybe not now, but on other occasions, if you meet each other again in the near future, maybe. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. This is, yes, exactly. Thank you for the clarification. There was not a question about the COP program of support steps, but the steps that the country could take to really get to institutionalizing their NFMS. And as I mentioned at the beginning, these steps vary for the different countries, but we've heard from our colleagues from Guatemala, and Kenseth mentioned this, speaking to each other is the first one, and it was mentioned in the presentation, talking about policy, looking into the legal framework, as also Francesca referred to that. Identifying the staff can be allocated to really put that work, because as I mentioned, there are sometimes overlapping priorities, and that is needed for clarity to be there. Also, one thing that I want to reinforce, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the COP is country-led and it goes at the speed of the country, but in any case, it's a long road. The road is long, as Kenseth said, and that's something that I would love to hear from the countries, and we would love to really be able to build this community. As you know, communities, it takes time to be built, but to build the COP communities where we all come together and you feel comfortable asking each other these questions. We will guide, we will bring the experts, but you could just really look into each other's experiences, and not just today during these 2 hours, but later on, if you would like to connect with the participants of this call. This is one of the reasons why we have these meetings, to create this community, which is challenging because we don't see each other in person as often as we would have liked to. So anybody from the countries that could share their experience on top of what we've already heard. We have about 15 minutes left, maybe about 5 more minutes for questions, discussion points, and then we have some fun stuff to do. I don't see any questions in the chat. But as I said, please feel free to just raise your question. Or are they new ones? There is a new question. Okay, Gabby, I'm gonna have to ask you to and by the way, Francesca, thank you for providing the e-learning course. I think this was something done by FAO, which then the idea is to have it online and self-guided so everybody can attend. Later on, I believe in October, it will be available. So thank you for doing that. There is a comment from Eliseo. Gabby, could you please read it out loud? Or Eliseo, you can pose it yourself.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Eli. I can speak in Spanish now that we have interpreters. Indeed, what I would like to share with you is that right at the beginning, even the year before that, this tool was quite useful. It's an FAO tool in order to analyze the NFMS in different countries, and it can be a very useful tool when you're starting this CLP process, and to remember that we have this umbrella uniting us, which is the National Forestry Monitoring System. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliseo. Yes, I want to link it back to what I said in my presentation. Sometimes it's essential to look at gap assessment done in the past and see to what extent the country has really benefited from them, have put them into place and made any changes based on the analysis. And then later on under the COP, we would be happy to support countries which provide or show interest in looking into governance, institutional aspects of the gap assessment. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. We have probably time for one more question or a comment. I would like to encourage any of the countries to come in, maybe a lesson learned through the process that could be of value to the countries that have entered the COP process later. It would be interesting maybe to also hear in the remaining time, which now is almost down to a minute or two, if any of our partners, GFOI partners, are on the call. Of course, you've heard from us and from Francesca. Eliseo just came in. Because these are partners that all of the COP countries have worked over the years and have built trusting relationships, something that Francesca mentioned. It really takes time to to really build the trust that then can really help the entire process of the COP. So trust, openness, transparency, they all have to be in place for this to work. There is another question in Spanish. Danielle, either please ask the question, or if not, then Gabby could do it in Spanish.
Sí, ¿qué tal?
Yes, I can speak.
Algo que quizás a
There's
veces
something that
olvidamos o que
we
siempre
tend
me
to
gusta
forget,
mencionar
or something
personalmente
that
en la
I
construcción de
personally
los
like
sistemas
to
de
mention
monitoreo
in
nacional,
building a national monitoring system, is who are our clients, the information users. Whenever you're building a system, you need to know who is going to use that, because with time, I believe that national forest monitoring systems have been launched within different initiatives with a very specific goal in mind. However, in time, we realized that there are new needs, right? New needs come up in terms of new detailed, new data, new quality of the data, types of information, such as the early warning systems. That was an example. Those of us who are active in this field know that, it's all about national reports, but then you have early warning information, which becomes much more useful because you can apply it in the field, and you can obtain new data, not only to report figures, but also to implement actions. And because maybe this information is more recent, more current, let's say, and it's important to integrate this in national monitoring systems so that we have a solid, consistent system that can give an answer to all the different needs that appear in different countries. We are aware that a national system cannot be the panacea. It cannot be perfect from all different points of view. But at least this should be accounted for so that we can improve and update and keep the whole system abreast and perfect it in time. Because that's the goal, right? A system must be alive and to be kept up to date whenever new needs arise. That's something that we need to remember.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, the system has to be alive, has to be flexible, because we need to adjust to new data, new requirements, and what is actually important for the clients. What is the system build? It has to have a purpose. Thank you so much, everyone. We would like to do two things. One is, maybe you could think about the country-led planning and that one word that I asked you to provide in the chat, and you did. And if that word has changed for you, please put it in the chat. If during this almost 2 hours you have actually learned more, or it got more confusing, but if there is something else that you would like to convey, a different word, please put it in the chat. It will be very interesting for us to learn from you. I would also like to say, as I said at the beginning, to start wrapping up this forum. That forum started in person. We realize that we don't have the capacity, as much as we'd love to see you in person more often, to do so. So we have the virtual forums. But right now, I would like to say and announce that in almost a month from today, GFOI will have its plenary, GFOI 2025. The plenary will take place 21st through 23rd of October in Bali, Indonesia. And I hope to see many of you there. I also want to let you know that the day before, on the 20th of October, our team, the COP team, will be organizing a COP Connect and Reflect, as we call it, a mini. It will be in one day, and we hope to see many of you participate. We have been in touch and working together to have you participate in that event, and that's very exciting for us to have you there. And during the plenary, we hope to interact with many of you. We hope that we could facilitate interactions among yourself among the different countries, as it was brought up to our attention during this call, kind of having this community of, as we call it, the COP community, and the countries can feel like they can touch on issues important to them. So before I say just a few words and thank you for your participation, we would like to take a group photo, for which I would like to ask you to turn on your cameras and keep them that way. My colleague Madison, once we're all with cameras on, she would try to take a group photo. So please turn them on and keep them on for a few minutes. Madison, let us know if we look all on and presentable and happy. So you can go ahead and take the picture.
I'll wait a few seconds.
Yeah.
Make sure that everybody is able to turn their camera on. Okay, if we're ready, happy faces, I'll take some photos. Okay, I think we've got everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madison. I would like to thank you all. And with this, just to say that first, thank you for participating today. Thank you for showing up to all the COP organized forums in person and online. Thank you also for reaching out to us when you need assistance from the program of support. And hopefully we can be of an assistance to be a facilitator among all of you. We're hoping to expand our pool of experts. And for now, I thank Francesca and Marco, our governance and legal experts who have been assisting us in our work, and you going forward. Next week, we will share with you the recording and brief notes from this meeting. Of course, I encourage you to reach out to us if something was not clear or you didn't get a chance to ask the questions that you were hoping to ask or you didn't receive the answers you were hoping to receive today. And I close this forum with two announcements already made, just to reinforce them. One is I hope to see most of you at the upcoming COP Mini Connect and Reflect in Bali in October. And also I would like to announce the next virtual forum will take place next year in June 2026. Until then, keep the good work. And as Ken said, the road is long. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Gracias a todos.